Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition.
Yay.
If you enjoy our show, you can let us know in the review section. You can follow or subscribe to it, and you can share it with other people so that they can like our show. So,
Yeah. I felt like there were maybe some real-time true crime things, but then I couldn't remember or find them. So anything just burning in your brain before I get started?
6 people got shot on the interstate the other day.
In Memphis?
Yeah.
Wow.
Including some children.
Oh my.
It's just road rage.
Great.
Yep. That's all I got.
All right. I guess I'll start. A content warning to start. Mostly in this case, the content warning is going to be about what you will find on Google.
Yes.
If you Google this case. So, I mean, it'll be somewhat graphic, but like as much as deaths are.
At your discretion.
But if you in the podcast, but if you Google, there are graphic photos of a dead body, mostly post-autopsy, that are quite difficult to look at. So if you know that that's hard for you, be careful with your Googling.
Yeah.
And that's my advice. All right. Jackie Johnson filed a missing persons report when her 17-year-old son, Kendrick, hadn't returned home by 11:30 on the night of January 10th, 2013. He sometimes would have things to do after school, but he would never be this late coming home. The police officers taking her report told her that he was probably just out with some girl. By the morning, her fears had only worsened because he still hadn't come home or called. Jackie went to the school as soon as she could to find out if Kendrick had come to school that morning or if anything had happened the day before. She never could have guessed what would be discovered at Lowndes High School later that day. Kendrick, known by his family as KJ, was a junior in high school, and he was on the football, basketball, and track teams. His mom actually says, when we say KJ, we mean King Jesus, and tells how all of her kids have KJ as their initials. Because his dad is Kenneth, so then they have like a Kenneth Johnson Jr., Kendrick, and then his sister is also a K. So
cute.
They're all named after King Jesus, I guess. Cute. On the morning of January 11th, Jackie was speaking to the school counselor when she heard other staff call the phone saying that they had found a body in the school's old gym, and she immediately knew that this was her son, KJ. Lowndes High School had 2 gyms, the old and the new. The old one was old, and the new one was new. Yep. We once had 2 gyms. There was a life sports class happening that day when 2 students climbed up on top of some rolled up mats. So basically picture those mats that they used to roll out for like cheerleading, but then they would roll them up and they're fat. They were rolled up and stood like vertically against the wall. So they climbed up on top of those mats and they looked down into one of the mats and saw someone's feet. Next to Kendrick's feet were orange and white Nike tennis shoes, right at the level of his calves and somewhat tucked by his legs, but he had no shoes on his feet. The police say that once they arrived, they found the body of a black male with dreadlocks, but otherwise unrecognizable. In Georgia, law requires first responders to call the coroner immediately upon finding a dead body, but the coroner was not called until 5 hours later. By the time the coroner had arrived, he said that the scene was disturbed and the body had been moved. Reports say that it was a teacher who had initially brought the mat down to the floor from its upright position. However, by the time the coroner had arrived, the body was partially pulled out of the mat. He wrote, Johnson's body was positioned lying approximately on his left side, sticking out of the rolled up mat from his head to approximately his abdominal area. The remainder of his body, from approximately the abdominal area to his feet, was inside the rolled up mat. Johnson's head was on the concrete floor in a pool of blood. Lowndes County Sheriff
pulled him by his head out of the mat.
I don't really know because like no one says that they did this. Like so like other than the
Maybe when they
teacher
pulled it down, he like
slid. Yeah, and like I don't know from like the police that responded, like from their reports, if they were detailed enough to say like how much of him was like sticking out,
Yeah.
or if the implication is yes that like before the coroner got there they had moved him. But yeah, it is weird to think that like that the part I understand that that would be maybe the part they want to look at, but it's like so you just like pulled him by his hair, by his
Right.
head, like yeah, I'm not sure. Lowndes County Sheriff Ashley Polk said that this may be the law that they have to call the coroner, but that they never do it that way. He says that since the coroner
That's a
can't,
problem.
I'd say so. He said that since the coroner can't enter the scene anyway until it's cleared, he just figured it was better to wait to call him. He didn't want him standing around waiting. I'm doing you a favor, friend. At the scene, investigators found 21 mats that were rolled up against the wall in the gym. That's a lot of mats. Yeah. Near the mats, they found one black and white Adidas tennis shoe, a yellow folder, a physical science textbook, a gray Hollister pullover, and a few blood stains on the walls of the gym. The crime scene report says that near the bleachers they found a pair of black, gray, and orange Nike shoes with blood on them. However, this feels like a strange like combination of the two shoes we know about. Because the gray and orange Nikes were in the mat with KJ's body, and then black and white Adidas shoes were found separate from one another. One was at the bottom of the mat, presumably on KJ's body, and the other was like a little bit away. The black and white Adidas shoes were confirmed to be Kendrick's, given to him years before by a former coach. The folder also was Kendrick's. It had his school documents inside. The blood spots on the wall were confirmed to be human blood, but did not match KJ. And in the girls' bathroom, investigators did find paper towels in the garbage that were saturated in blood, but these also were not a match to KJ. On the scene analysis of KJ's body, found that rigor mortis had set in, lividity had settled in the top portion of his body, and that there were no visible signs of blunt force trauma or wounds. They found corded headphones in his hands, because it is 2013, and a phone.
I use corded headphones.
Get out of here. And a phone in his pocket.
Today I was doing homework in class, and I was like listening to music on my corded headphones, and I looked up and I was like, oh, thank God someone else has corded headphones. It's not just me.
Wait, in this? Like from this case?
No.
Like who else had them?
Someone in my class.
Oh, okay. A child?
No.
Oh, in your actual class?
Yeah, in my grad school class. I looked up, and a guy that's in my class was using corded Apple headphones. And I thought, thank God.
Sir, are you ancient or poor?
He's definitely older than me.
Within 24 hours, the police held a press conference saying that they were investigating Kendrick Johnson's death as a homicide. But just 4 months later, they shared their theory that KJ had gone into the mats willingly and got stuck upside down, and they ruled the death an accident and stopped investigating further. The regional medical examiner, Dr. Kraft, found the cause of death to be positional asphyxia, and the manner was accidental. She did not find evidence of him being beaten, stabbed, or shot, and she notes only one injury at all, a superficial abrasion on his finger. I think positional asphyxia is like if you like Google it, it's like mostly only in like, I mean, it's not only, but this is just where it happens. It's like in like fetuses, like in utero, like unable to breathe
Yeah.
because of their position. So,
But I mean, like, if you're stuck upside down.
yeah, no, I mean, it's certainly the correct word if that's what happened. It's just like interesting. Like this was very hard for people to wrap their heads around because like we do not hear of this.
Yes.
Like ever happening.
Yeah, but when's the last time somebody killed someone by stuffing them in a mat upside down and leaving them there?
It's true. The Johnson family did not believe for a moment that their son's death was an accident, that he would have gone into the mats willingly, or that law enforcement was telling them the truth.
Yeah, it's like laughable to think that he like climbed on top of those mats and was like, "Here I go."
Yeah. Yeah. They claimed that they were not allowed to see their son's body once he was found, but police reports say that Kenneth Johnson was brought in to positively ID Kendrick's body on Sunday, January 13th. So some argue that like this is an example of the Johnson family like either lying or like exaggerating circumstances because they were allowed to see his body. I don't know the protocol of this, but to me, pretending I'm a parent, I feel like 2 whole days before I see my dead kid seems like a long time to me. Plus, I will add, if you fully believe that this is a cover up, then you would not really believe the police records that say Kenneth saw his body on the 13th.
Yeah. And
So,
it's not like they found this body and then in the course of 2 days they were like, "Oh, maybe it's this kid. Like, let's
yeah.
bring his parents in." Like, I know that like his face is unrecognizable, but like they knew as soon as they found him who he was.
Yeah. And his mother was at the school.
Right.
And
she knew that they had found a body. And then it was
and
probably
it's said in a documentary, his sister said that they did, I think, bring her in on the day that they found him, but to identify the shoe. Like they didn't show, which like to be fair, it's horrifying.
Right.
His face. So like if you want to say like we're not going to show you this right now, you can meet us at the crime lab, like whatever. But they knew who it was. They had his sister come in and identify his shoe.
Right.
They knew who these things belonged to.
And it's
they
okay
found
to say that.
Yeah.
You can say like, "Hey, we need some time. You don't need to see this."
Yeah. At Lowndes High School, students had to pay a locker fee in order to store their belongings in lockers.
The fuck?
So some students came forward after KJ's death and said that it was common for them to put their belongings into the rolled up mats instead of paying that fee.
I mean, there's 21 of them. So.
Yeah. Why not? Why not? In fact, a friend of KJ's says that he and Kendrick shared gym shoes. I think that he describes the orange and white Nikes, which is interesting because the assumption is that the orange and white Nikes are what Kendrick was wearing that day. And the assumption is that he was going to get the black and white Adidases to go to gym. So I don't know. And that could be a miss in communication. So I don't know how much that means.
In one way or another, he's changing from one pair of shoes to the other.
Yeah. And he shares shoes with his friend. He says that they did keep them in the gym mats. Usually, though, he says the mats were laying down sideways, but over Christmas break, the school had been deep cleaned and the mats were all now standing upright. You know, when you walk back into school and they're like, "Be careful on the floors, we've waxed the gym floors." And you're like, fuck off about the gym floors. This friend said, yes. This friend said that typically, if the mats were standing tall, they would have tilted the mats downward to fetch the shoes out. Or upward? I don't know. Yeah, downward, I guess. His friends do not believe that he would have gone into the mat to get the shoes out because he would have known to just tilt the mat and the shoes would come out the bottom. Yeah.
Yes. Like a slide.
Yep. I mean, and like we don't even know that they're like lodged in the middle. Like they probably fall to the bottom.
Right.
you know?
Especially if like they don't know that there's things in the mats and they just like over the break just push them up against the wall. They're definitely just at the bottom.
Yeah. I'm going to give you the presumed timeline based on video footage, attendance records, and some witnesses. This one's going to feel all over the place because I just gave you like a rundown of some things, but we're going to revisit all of those things. And then all of those things are going to be disputed. So we're going to bounce. So, okay. See how this goes. It is said that Kendrick was currently not on the football team based on some somewhat unknown reasons. We'll see how unknown they really are. But his coaches had told him, supposedly, that he could come back if his grades increased and his attendance improved. So the guess here is that KJ was in a hurry to get to his gym class, or to get to his gym shoes, so that he could get to his 4th block gym class and try to avoid being late. He didn't need any more tardies. Attendance records show that KJ did not make it to his 4th block that day. Kendrick's family claims that he quit the team because of an incident that I will get into later. But this is interesting if it kind of takes away that claim that he was in a hurry because he now cares about his attendance. Now, like, he could care about his attendance without it being like a prerequisite to get back on the team. But then it's like what his parents are going to claim happened, like, doesn't really sound like he would want to get back on the team. So, like, unclear. There were other people.
Like, also, he's 17 years old. Is it possible that, like, he wants to get back on the team because he loves the sport, but his parents don't want him to get back on the team for other reasons, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And, like, at the end of the day, like, his parents have, whether you think they're right or not at the end of this, they feel that they have, like, hindsight now. Like, their son's dead. And so, like, for them looking back, they can be like, oh, fuck that football team. Like, not interested. But that doesn't mean he didn't think, I want to get to gym class on time so that I can do this. There were other people in the gym at the time that Kendrick went in, which was between 1 and 1:15, if the timestamps on the school's cameras are correct. It looked like he was either running or walking quickly. At 3:30, police say that the varsity basketball team was practicing. And then at 4, the school's color guard began practicing. None of these students heard or saw Kendrick go into the mats during those times. The school's surveillance video is also disputed by the family and their supporters. The video, as well as still images, has skips in it and are missing large gaps of footage. At times, there are students that are in an image and then they'll vanish, and new students will just appear, and then other students might reappear in other locations. However, both the school and the police department said that they did not edit the footage. The police replied that the cameras were motion activated, which is why there are large amounts of time with no footage. When KJ appears in the gym's footage at 1:09 p.m., it is the first footage since around 11 a.m. However, we know that there were people in and out of the gym during that time that evidently just didn't trigger the motion activation. He was also caught on camera in the hallway just outside of the gym at 12:59. Which would seem to indicate that it took him, this would seem to indicate that some or both of the camera's timestamps are off, assuming that it did not take him 10 minutes to walk through a door frame.
I would hope not.
Yeah. The cameras do not catch any usable footage of Kendrick going to or into the gym mats, nor do they catch the 2 girls who found his body the following day. It is a little confusing.
But there is footage of the gym mats. Like the camera sees the gym mats?
So the camera that catches the gym mats is like very, very blurry, and the gym mats are in the very back corner and you can't see the top of them. Okay. So like you can see a person go near them in a white shirt. Could be him. We don't know, but you can't see the top of them either way. And so like kind of the same thing with the girls, that like you may be able to see bodies over at that time, but we like can't see anything of use. It's like pretty impossible. It is a little confusing how it would not have caught all of this motion, but it was explained to us that the cameras had a pretty low sensitivity level and they only captured movement that was a certain distance from the camera. I'm going to play you a little bit of that footage. And we're going to look at all the various distances from the camera. Okay. So I don't know. There's other like angles and things. And then I think everyone leaving, I think the point is just to show you that like those are a lot of the same people that were going into the gym and yet KJ's not leaving with them. But it seems to me like it catches movement when people are playing basketball in the back. It catches movement when people are walking in the front. But I don't know.
Yeah. Also, like, how chilling to like know that you were in the gym, just like playing with your friends, and like there was someone like dying or dead there.
Yeah. Yeah. The Johnson family also claims that they were only given this small amount of footage when they had requested 1,900 hours of footage. At first, I said, how many days of footage are they asking for? But then I realized there's like mini cameras.
Yeah.
So it's like 24 hours times like every camera in the building. And they may be asking for 48 hours or whatever. So it's like, I settled myself, 1,900. A lot. The phone in KJ's pocket had not had service since December 27th. It's January 11th, and was connected to the school's Wi-Fi, so it seemed like he was just using it to listen to music. The phone was found in his pants pocket, and it was noted that his pants were unbuttoned and unzipped. I remember that it said unbuckled. I don't know then if that means like a belt was unbuckled and then the pants were unzipped, or if unbuckled was just a way to say unbuttoned. I assumed if they're unzipped, they're unbuttoned. So take that with a grain of salt. At the bottom of the mat was the one black and white Adidas tennis shoe, as well as a pile of KJ's blood. Although the shoe does have a few drops of blood on it, it does look from the photo like the shoe is on top of the blood, in that there isn't a lot of blood on it and there is blood underneath it. And I just want to show you this. I guess everyone else will see it too. Can you see that? So I just like, I don't know. People argue that like there is blood in spots. And like, no, it's not completely on top of the blood. Like the blood's kind of to the side. But like, how does the shoe get over that section of blood if you're bleeding onto it?
Right. And like, what are the odds? Oh, sorry. What are the odds that he's like clearly like dripping blood onto the floor, but just to the side of the shoe?
Yeah. Yeah.
And under it.
Yeah, so people claimed like this is weird, there's a shoe and there's no blood. So police disputed claims that there's no blood on the shoe because there are a few spots of blood on the shoe. And I'll give them that. However, I think that most people just thought there would be more. The other black and white shoe, like I mentioned, was found away from the mats. So some theorize that KJ got one shoe out So like dove in head 1st, got one shoe out, was able to shimmy his way out and at least like toss it out of the mat. Then he went back into the mat, and this is when he got stuck. Whatever way this happens, like the details are hard because like this is so absurd. Like and if someone did die this way, like it just is like it doesn't happen that much, so it's like hard to figure out. So then they think maybe he went back in, got stuck. As far as the blood, some people have said like, was the shoe in his hand?
Right.
And then he's hanging upside down, and then he loses consciousness. Maybe he doesn't completely drop the shoe yet because it's like stuck in here, and so it falls after he has lost some blood. And like while I do like get that, and I am very much a person who is like, how can we know? Like, you tell me Kathleen Peterson's blood splatters mean something, I'm like, girl, you don't know how her blood went. Like, stop. So like I don't know, but it just feels very convenient that like he would bleed all over the floor this certain amount, he would drop, the shoe would fall and get 1 or 2 more drops on it, and then he's done bleeding for the whole rest of the time. And like,
I mean, if he died.
No, I know, but I mean, like, you're telling me the shoe doesn't fall until the perfect time between consciousness loss, blood loss, and then blood stopping. Like, it feels like, I don't know. I mean, it's totally possible. I just like, it seems just wild to me.
Yeah.
Jackie Johnson does also say, although like you can't see it in this picture, but she does allege that he was also like vomiting. And there's no vomit on the shoe. But I mean, we also obviously don't see any vomit near the shoe, so I don't know that means much to me. But any other thoughts about the shoe? You seemed to be nodding to the theory that maybe he got one out.
Yeah, I think that like that would make sense for one of them being like a
separate
way. I just like, even, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think of it also if it makes sense that like he was like killed, and then like how does the shoe get on top of the blood but under him? You know what I'm saying? And like, I'm not saying that I don't think he was killed, but I do like wonder that like, I don't know, like how, like, in the other realm of possibility that he's like shoved into this mat on purpose, starts bleeding, and then how does the shoe get again on top of the blood?
Yeah, so you will find from me a lot in this case that, you know, there are a lot of cases where like you'll have like a X amount of evidence leads you to believe blank, and X amount of evidence leads you to believe blank, and you're unsure because there's 40% of this, 60% of this. In this case, the same evidence, I'm like, you're telling me no one heard or saw him climb into the mats. Okay, that's kind of sketchy. You're also telling me no one heard or saw him get attacked. So it's like, for me, every piece of evidence like confuses me more, because it's like, it doesn't really make sense that he was bleeding onto the shoe because the shoe doesn't have blood on it. But also, the idea is that the shoe is planted, right? That like he was already bled, and then they maybe put a couple dots of blood on it, and then they put the shoe there. But that would mean that like he's hanging upside down, whether he's dead before or he is hit and then dies from being upside down. Then he's somehow like lifted, and then the shoe is placed underneath, and then he is like put back.
Like they tip the mat over, put the shoe in, and then bring it back. It just seems like, what's the point?
Like, unless the whole, like, they are just like so smart and they were like, we're gonna make it look like he's diving for a shoe.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to make it look like he's diving for a shoe, there's got to be a shoe. And so it's like, but that seems like so well thought out to me that you said, first of all, I know kids put their shoes in here. Second of all, I know KJ puts his shoes in here. Third of all, I know that like that's the story that will make the most sense of how someone got in this mat, is that they were trying to get their shoe. This is the shoe he wears to gym. So like it just seems like a lot for like supposedly high schoolers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like this part almost makes me think that an accident makes more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because like I
And that
just
we
feel
just
like
can't explain blood and
right.
stuff,
I feel like there's like I feel like the most reasonable explanation for the shoe is that he was holding it at one point and dropped it, and it just seems unlikely that he was put into the mat by someone else holding the shoe.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I don't know.
Yeah. Unless like his shoe was actually in the mat, then they wrapped him up in the mat with his own shoe, and then the same thing happens, it falls. Like, I don't know. It's just so hard to, yeah.
Yeah, like if the mat was unrolled.
So I think his parents think that he was like rolled into it, not like
Okay.
shoved into it.
Okay. I'm following them now.
It's still, I don't know. Yeah. To me, like with the shoe thing, kind of like you're saying, like none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
Whether it's murder or not murder, that
like,
doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Sense?
But to me, I can wrap my head around the fact that a freak accident would be weirder. Like a freak accident, there will be parts I don't understand.
That's why it's called a freak accident.
And that's why I'm like, probably that, and I just don't get it. But like murders, we've seen murders, honey. Like, and this is not like a murder I've seen.
So here's my new theory: is
God.
that he was hurt in some way. There's blood on the floor, and then they wrap him and his shoe up in the mat, and it just kind of happens to get placed on top of where the blood on the floor was already, and then the shoe drops. And then because he's still injured or maybe dead, but in the mat, a few drops of blood drop from his body onto the shoe.
He could still lose blood from the lividity.
Yeah, and that's why there's blood under the shoe, because it was not blood. Yeah, not blood that dripped from him in the mat, but blood that was just on the floor already.
Sure.
And then him and the shoe are rolled up, placed on top of that spot of blood, and the shoe falls. And some blood droplets come.
Why not both shoes? Like, did the other one just fall out when they were doing all this? Did they purposely leave it separate?
Maybe there was already blood on the shoe.
They were like, true. Like, let's just put it with the blood, with his bloody body or whatever. Yeah. True.
Or maybe the other shoe just got forgotten because it was farther away.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting. Okay. I need this type of stuff in this case. I'm so confused.
Again, maybe the shoe and the blood just kind of happened to be in that spot, and it's just kind of a red herring that they happened to roll him up and put him on top of it.
Like his own shoe and his own blood?
Like, I'm just saying, like, maybe, like, again, like, if he was beaten, maybe the shoe was already there on the spot of blood, and then they were hiding the body, wrapped him up, put the mat up, and it just kind of happened to cover the shoe and the blood, and it wasn't intentional.
Sure.
To hide the shoe.
Yeah. I just feel like if it's a murder, the shoe had to have been like thought of.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm back for more.
Come on.
They did intentionally cover the shoe in the blood because it would be obvious that someone had been hurt there, but the other shoe's not in blood, so not as worried about it, and they don't want to touch anything.
True. Sure.
For leaving fingerprints. So they're not going to move that shoe. They don't have gloves. They're not going to move either shoe. So they just got to cover one because it's in the blood, and the other one, it doesn't matter.
True. Yeah.
I'm in their brains.
It's a good job.
Thank you.
In addition to the shoe, people struggle with KJ's size and being able to fit inside of the mat's opening. So KJ was 5'10" and would have likely entered with his arms outstretched if reaching for his shoes. The mat was 6 feet, so people feel like Kendrick should have been sticking out of the mat a significant amount. This is longer than 2 inches. He was also about 19 inches wide at his shoulders, while the mat's opening was only 14 inches across. This is where I say each piece of evidence feels a double edge to me. Again, if KJ's arms are outstretched, he's less wide. So you lose a few inches from your shoulders if you're doing this. I don't know that that means it's easy for him to get in, but that also lends itself to him not being able to get out.
Yeah. But if he's like, if fitting like that perfectly
Yeah.
into the hole, like there's like very little movement that can be
Yeah.
happening for him to be retrieving things.
Yep.
If they're saying he successfully retrieved a shoe
Or even got
jimmied back
one,
out.
or even if we were saying like he got the one shoe and like had it and then it didn't fall till later, like if you have no room, how are you
Right.
getting this?
Right. Well, and I'm saying like the shoe that's farther
Sure,
away,
yeah.
like how would he have shimmied out with that shoe in hand,
Yeah.
tossed it, and then gone back in? Like there's not
Yeah.
enough room.
Yeah, and I mean I don't know that that's a police theory, that one, why
Mhm.
that shoe is out, but it's a theory. But yeah, I mean it is tight for sure. People have wondered how no one, including the cameras, saw Kendrick entering the mats. Like I said, it does make me think that no one saw him being harmed either, so it doesn't really help us either way. They did conduct a test to see if someone could be heard screaming from inside of the mat if Kendrick had been yelling for help when he realized that he was stuck.
Mm-hmm.
In the test, they included people in the gym playing basketball and attempted to recreate the scene. They found that it would be very hard, if not impossible, to hear someone who is inside of those mats.
No.
Yeah. Very thick.
Horrifying. That's horrifying.
And
like again, it brings me back to like the like
how creepy.
Yeah, like if like you're the ones playing basketball, like to think there was someone in there either dying or dead and they may have been screaming and I didn't know.
Yeah, and I had listened to a couple things where they'd said like, you know, this is also a 17-year-old. Like, he may not have screamed. He may have thought, I can get myself out of this. I'm not going to embarrass myself.
Yeah.
I'm not going to start freaking out. Like, I'll be fine. And then by the time he's not fine, he's passed out.
Right.
And so we don't really know that he was screaming, but I mean, it is a good thing, I think, that they ran that test to say, like, honestly, though, like, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
Police were also questioned on their decision to only test the blood at the scene to KJ. They stated that they did not have the legal justification or the resources to test the blood of 3,000 students. Fair.
False?
Fair?
I disagree.
Fair. Here's what I would say. Well, first I'll add that also the school has staff and guests and sports events with visitors and years of changing students.
So test them too.
And so it would make it even more. However, so here's the thing. Here's how normal investigations work. You find out who people of interest are, and then you test them. So there weren't 3,000 students in the gym in that time frame. And of the ones in the gym, there weren't 3,000 of them that knew KJ. And of the ones that knew him, there weren't 3,000 of them who had a problem with him. So why don't we start there, just like we would in any other case, and we'd say, Mary was beefing with that guy that's now dead. Like, let's just test it against her. Like, why don't we say, especially since we'll find out that people have a very clear opinion on who this would have been, why don't we test them?
Yeah.
Why don't we just compare the blood to all the students that were on the camera?
And like, here's the other thing is like, and investigators do sometimes do that. Maybe not testing the blood of 3,000 people, but like in some way starting with a wide pool of suspects and narrowing it down.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
you can say we've got 3,000 suspects plus however many people are on staff. Like these are the people, and you have a visitors. That's why schools have a visitors list, so that you can see exactly who was in the school at that time on that day. Eliminate anyone who was absent, anyone
Mhm.
who called in sick to work, anyone whose visitors time check-in was before or after he went into the gym or was found. You eliminate those people, and then it doesn't hurt to say, like, I know it has to be, if he was killed, I know it has to be one of these people. And if he wasn't killed, I know this blood belongs to one of these people, and they could tell me what happened.
Yeah. I mean, they don't know that the blood has a, like, I mean, people get nosebleeds in
Yeah.
gyms all the time. So I think the idea is like this could have been a fight from before, like this could have been whatever. And I do think you would run into some problems trying to test a bunch of minors without parental consent and
I
without.
mean, I'm not saying do it without parental consent.
No, but I'm saying when they say the legal justification, I'm saying like I think that they recognize like if they start saying like, hey, we want to test your kids simply because we're testing every kid, they're gonna be like, where was my kid? And like, why are you thinking about them? But like what I do know you can do is say your kid is one of 20 who were seen on footage in the
Hmm.
gym during this time. And so like they are now a person of interest.
Right.
And what you definitely can do is, like I said, this person that we're going to talk about at the end is you could say, everyone seems to think you killed this kid. Why don't we just compare your blood to the blood on the
Well,
wall?
let's
And
be
then
honest.
you're free to go.
There's no way in hell his parents would give consent for
No,
him to be DNA tested.
no, but I mean, part of this case continued after he was over 18. So,
Yeah, I'm just saying.
but yeah, it's just, I get that it's like hard. I just think it's a cop out to say, like, so we did nothing. Like, okay, what?
Yeah.
Um, and then someone I think ended up taking ownership of the blood in the girls' bathroom. She
Mm.
said she got hit during color guard and her nose was bleeding. And she said, that was me. That's my blood. My bad.
So sorry.
I've caused some confusion. The way that KJ died was difficult for many people to wrap their heads around, but a lot of people were still able to accept that this was simply an unbelievable freak accident. In the following hours, months, and years, though, it became increasingly more difficult to understand the behaviors of those entities involved in the case. Students said that once Kendrick's body was found, they were instructed to just continue switching classes and doing their school day as normal, all while Jackie Johnson stood in the hallway screaming and crying. Just hours after this, Kendrick's friend Solomon Arrington received a message on Facebook saying that he could end up in a body bag next.
Oh.
His mom brought this to police and says that, quote, the detective told me I didn't have to worry about that person because they knew where he was, end quote. Lieutenant Jones made a statement saying, quote, they were not threats, they were Facebook comments, and we followed up and interviewed those who had allegedly made them, and the interviews did not provide information that would be beneficial, end quote.
Because
Not,
threats
not,
can never come in a
uh-huh,
written form.
not threats, Facebook comments about you being murdered. Awesome. It was also discovered that there was a third pair of tennis shoes that were black and white with orange laces in the gym. So perhaps when I said, sounds like the police are combining these two pairs of shoes, perhaps they had actually fucking seen these third pair of shoes. And they did not really want us to know that because they had a red substance on them, but the shoes were not collected or tested as evidence.
Great. Good.
Awesome. Kenneth and Jackie say that in addition to not being allowed to see their son's body at first, the room that he was being kept in at the crime lab was notably warm for a room meant to be a cooler. But this is disputed by authorities.
Of course it is.
Probably the Probably the most well-known part of this case surrounds the photos of KJ post-mortem. Jackie Johnson says that they were not the ones who initially shared the photos of KJ, but that after they were made public, the family began using them to show people the state of his body. The family says that one of the photos, arguably the worst, which is a close-up of KJ's face, was taken right after his body was discovered. However, it is now known that the photo was actually taken after the autopsy was performed, and autopsies are not gentle. So it is unclear if the family just wasn't aware of when the photo was taken. They thought it was taken right after and they were wrong, or if they were purposely trying to mislead people. They argue that his face clearly looks like he had been beat up because he is severely deformed and swollen. His body, though, was allegedly hanging upside down for possibly almost 24 hours. All of his blood would have pooled at the lowest part of his body and then eventually would have started coming out of his body. For the Johnson family, seeing their son unrecognizable like this just didn't make sense with the story they were being told. And I get that.
Yeah.
I do think that much of KJ's state is from hanging upside down. Honestly, whether he was assaulted before or not, I do think that it makes sense that that is why he looked like that. Yeah. I also understand, though, that if he was assaulted prior in his face, it would be very hard to tell.
Yeah.
I kind of lost it.
Yeah. I think if I looked at a photo of my son and saw that, I would think, who beat the shit out of me?
And you said it was an accident. You'd be like, oh, fuck right off.
Right. Like, of course it wasn't. Who is that? And like, but yes, in like hindsight, especially like having seen the photos, I'm trying to think of like how to describe it. It's not like there's like a specific part of his face that's like that looks like it was beaten. Like it doesn't like he doesn't have like a black eye or something, and like everything else is kind of like intact. Like his whole face just looks like kind of blown up. Like it just looks like everything has swollen. Yeah, and I think that kind of even swelling would be caused by all the blood rushing to your head. And like and also like I don't know if this is accurate, but like I'm thinking about like as a kid when like we would hang upside down and like you look different when you're hanging upside down, and then I wonder if rigor mortis sets in while you're upside down.
Yeah,
would your face kind of freeze in that way?
Yeah.
And then also like with lividity would have been fixed in the top of his head, that would cause the discoloration and bruising that we see. So I do think it makes sense that that's what it's from, but I also agree that if he were beaten prior to that, we probably wouldn't be able to recognize which came from which.
Yeah. And I would not dare recommend that you find them, but there are also photos from the autopsy, I believe, that are a little more like torso and up, and so you can kind of see the gradient from like his regular skin to where it starts to purple. Yeah. And in that way you're able to kind of tell like that, again, not to say that there aren't wounds underneath or traumas or whatever, but you can kind of tell that like this is just what has happened to that part of his body. Yeah, like he's probably swollen, more swollen in his shoulders than he would otherwise be. He's certainly purple and red. And so I think, again, like horrifying as a parent for that to be the last image of your son, no matter what happened to him. But also to like have that be the last image, but also not believe what you're being told and just be like, it just isn't computing for me.
Right.
So,
especially if you have reason to believe that something bad did happen to him, you're going to start piecing those things together
mhm,
based on that assumption.
yeah. The next step for the family was to get a second autopsy done. So they had KJ's body exhumed in June of 2013 and taken to medical examiner Dr. Bill Anderson. When Anderson received the body, he was shocked to find that all of Kendrick's organs were missing and had been replaced in his body cavity with newspaper. It isn't unheard of for organs to be kept in a case where there may need to be continued testing or like things might be disputed. Uh, but no one claims that that's what happened.
Mhm.
Sherry Lang, the GBI's director of public affairs, said that the organs were placed back in Kendrick's body. The body was closed up, and then he was transported to the funeral home. Oh,
Bless
I tried to go in my shirt, but then my necklace. Um, she says that she knows this is what happened because it was their typical practice, not because she was there.
you. Mhm.
Thank you, Sherry.
She said, well, that's what we normally do. Just like the
Mm-hmm.
girl who was like, well, we never call the coroner.
Yeah. Uh, Antonio Harrington, the owner of the funeral home, says that when they received the body, there were no organs. The president of the National Association of Medical Examiners told CNN that he has never heard of the practice of replacing organs with old newspapers. Typically, if the organs are not going to be placed back in the body cavity, then the people handling the body would fill it with either dry, clean sawdust or cotton mixed with embalming powder.
That makes sense because that's how taxidermy is done.
Mm-hmm. And it's like kinder
Yeah.
than newspaper.
But is the funeral home saying that like they got him with no organs and then they put the newspaper in?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like they just didn't know what to do?
They just there's really no explanation for the newspaper. Like no one ever says why. There's like a lot of theories. Um, but I mean, a funeral home would be who would prepare him and like stuff him. So
Yeah. I, and like also like newspaper just seems like so unwise
yeah,
to stick inside a body like that. I don't feel like that would hold up.
it seems absorbent.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I think that there's a reason that like sawdust and things
Uh-huh.
are
Yeah.
used typically for that.
And
And
then
you should know that.
mhm. An investigation found that although it is not best practice, stuffing the body cavity with crumpled old newspaper was not illegal. So, boom, done.
I don't think they were trying to say it was.
The Harrington Funeral Home had offered to handle Kendrick's body and funeral preparations pro bono, so some wonder if this was just an effort to cut costs. Then you shouldn't have offered.
Right.
I would have just paid.
That's crazy.
Ugh. Records also indicate that the funeral home staff did sign a document saying that they received the body with all organs and all clothing. It's possible that this is just an oversight and staff signed the document without actually taking inventory of what was in the body.
They're like, that's
Otherwise,
how they normally come in.
so we
I'm
just
like
knew.
every like thing we hear about this case, they're like thinking of someone else and they're like, yeah,
We did
that's
that.
that's how
Yeah.
that goes.
Yeah. Otherwise, we would have to believe that the organs went missing after getting to the funeral home, which I do feel is unlikely. But the family's
What they
legal
do with
team,
them.
I don't know. The family's legal team filed a complaint against the Harrington Funeral Home, claiming that the director is helping in efforts to obscure KJ's cause of death. The complaint also included the GBI, since they claimed that they had replaced all of KJ's organs back into the body after the first autopsy. According to this complaint, Antonio Harrington originally stated that one or two organs may have been missing. But in October, he wrote a letter to the family's attorney stating that the organs had been destroyed and discarded before the body was sent to him from the GBI.
How does he know that?
You don't know. They told
It's like,
him
yeah,
because
but it
they're
was
all working together.
he was only missing a couple.
Just a couple. And then what did you do with the rest, Mr. Harrington? Of course, in most cases, there are experts hired by opposing sides who often come to very different conclusions. So the medical examiner for the first autopsy is obviously involved with the government and the GBI in some way. And Dr. Bill Anderson, who did this second autopsy, was hired directly by the Johnson family and their legal team. So we will not pretend that people don't have biases. Anderson found a bruise on the front of KJ's neck that he felt indicated blunt force trauma. This led him to conclude that the cause of death was non-accidental blunt force trauma to the right of the neck. Simple, done. They also found that the paramedics who saw the body on January 11th noted bruising in the same spot in their report. I think it is certainly interesting to know that that was noted by someone. However, I do wonder how he's he's bruised everywhere.
Yeah.
So unless bruising just means that spot still looked different than the other spots, I guess. But I can maybe get how the medical examiner can see it months later if decomposition has happened, I guess. But how on the day of could the paramedics tell when he's basically a giant bruise?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anderson explains that blunt force trauma to that area of the neck could lead to someone's sudden death. The other notable injuries that he found were a few cuts on KJ's fingers and fingernails, which he thought looked quite recent. They were kind of bright red, still bloody, not scabbed or anything. Since he was unable to review KJ's organs directly, Dr. Anderson had to rely on the reports from the first autopsy. He thought it was interesting that they did not find fluid in KJ's lungs, as it would be expected from positional asphyxia. He says that the lungs were noted as a normal weight, but in the case of positional asphyxia, he would expect them to weigh 3 to 4 times their original size once full of fluid. And I ain't no doctor, but that makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know. The Johnson family also worked with members of the NAACP, Reverend Floyd Rose from the SCLC, and their lead attorney was Mr. Benjamin Crump. Crump is a well-known civil rights attorney who has been involved in some pretty major cases, including those of Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, George Floyd, Tyree Nichols, those impacted by the Flint water crisis, and the estate of Henrietta Lacks.
He's a king.
He has been referred to as Black America's Attorney General. Go off, Mr. Crump.
Yeah.
The family was able to organize in the community to hold protests outside of the Lowndes County Courthouse, where Jackie and Kenneth were arrested at least once. Unclear, but at least once. Kendrick's body was exhumed once more to have a third autopsy completed, once again by Dr. Anderson. He collected additional tissue samples in 2018, and he found what he believed to be additional blunt force trauma on KJ's chest that had become more obvious over time. So he found a red area that was I guess decomposing differently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's embalmed, so it's very slow.
Yeah.
I must also say there's a documentary about this that I was going to recommend, but every single one of these pictures that I've talked about is in it.
Mm-hmm.
And this picture where he's 5 years decomposed or 5 years dead is in it. And it's a little hard.
Yeah, and
I've never seen someone between freshly dead and skeletonized. And so I was like, oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, but I was gonna say, when he said tissue samples, if the tissue is bruised from blunt force trauma, that would be a different kind of bruising than positional bruising.
Yes. So he put that sample under a microscope and found that there was hemorrhaging present on that spot of KJ's chest, which would indicate trauma. We covered a lot of things that people think don't quite add up in this case. But what we haven't talked about are the theories on what might have actually happened. So, KJ's family and friends immediately connected his death to a fight that he had been in with another football player. He had gotten in a fight with a student named Brian on the bus that ended in police being called. Kendrick's dad and his friend said that KJ won the fight and that Brian was embarrassed. When the fight was eventually broken up, Brian was released to his parents while KJ was made to ride home in the back of a police car. Officers said that Officers said that they did look into this early on and they ruled that it was unrelated. Awesome. The Johnson family's theory revolves around Brian Bell, whose father was an FBI agent. The police, I guess I should have emphasized that a little more. The Johnson family's theory revolves around Brian Bell, whose father was an FBI agent. The police said that they had asked to speak to Brian Bell, I guess because they knew that they'd had a fight, whatever, but that he declined to be interviewed. But don't worry, they still looked into him. According to school attendance records and the FBI analysis of the school security footage, Brian and KJ were in opposite parts of the school, and he absolutely could not have been involved. In a documentary titled Finding Kendrick Johnson, the one I was talking about, the filmmaker journalist person found an FBI report that had been heavily redacted. In fact, there were pages of the school's surveillance footage which followed both Kendrick's movements that day and Brian Bell's movements that day. So they had looked, which they said they did. So good job. They checked where he was. The images of any minor students that are not Kendrick are like blocked off. There's like a square over them, even in the FBI's like redacted version. But still, the people researching noticed that there was one frame on each of the boys' pages that was a perfect match. So basically, in a list of KJ's movements, it shows he is in this hallway at 9:53 a.m. with anonymous students surrounding him. Meanwhile, in Brian's movement, he is in the exact same hallway at 9:53 a.m. with the same students surrounding KJ. So he's one of those blocked out students. In the following pages, the FBI wrote descriptions of what each image showed, and they wrote, Kendrick Johnson is observed in a covered walkway moving towards the camera. Bell is observed in the same location at this time. Oh. So they saw it. Although 9:53 a.m. is a good bit away from the time that KJ was last seen at 1:22 p.m., this is still proof of significant inconsistencies on the part of law enforcement. In addition to this being hidden, the Lowndes County Sheriff Department and the GBI have said that Brian Bell's alibi was rock solid and there was no possibility that he was involved. Brian Bell himself spoke out and said that he did not see KJ at all that entire day, which obviously seems untrue. There also doesn't really, to me, seem like a way to explain this other than like a deliberate attempt to suppress this information.
Yeah.
They didn't just like miss it.
Right.
There is more that made the Johnsons suspicious of the Bells in addition to that fight and his father's status as an FBI agent. Kenneth said that KJ had told him shortly after his fight that he noticed Brian's brother, Brandon, staring at him. And KJ wasn't really sure how to describe it, but the way Brandon was looking at him made him feel like the situation was not over. He also told his dad that Brian's father, Rick, had come up to him and said that it wasn't a fair fight that day, but if KJ wanted, he could come over to their house and give it another go. I'm good, sir. Thank you for the offer to beat your kid's ass again. The Johnsons filed a wrongful death suit against 38 people or organizations in 2015. They alleged that both Bell brothers had lured KJ to the gym, possibly using a female student, and killed him at the command of their father. Search warrants were executed at the Bell residence for possible obstruction of justice and witness tampering. Other students had alleged that Rick Bell had been following them, like showing up at one of their workplaces after KJ's death, leading them to believe that he wanted to scare them into not talking. Following this raid, which would be the witness tampering. Following this raid is the first time that Brian and his brother Brandon spoke about the case. And in his interview, Brian said that he and KJ were great friends. The interviewer said, even at the time of his death? And he said, yeah. Okay.
We're just friends who beat each other up for fun.
Yeah. The Bell family did file a countersuit for defamation and said that the suit lacked substantial justification. They claimed that defamatory statements were made to schools that Brian was considering attending and playing baseball for. In fact, FSU did rescind their scholarship offer for Brian to be their linebacker. The Bell family also named Ebony magazine in a suit, causing Ebony to take down an article that they had published about the Bell family theory. So it worked. Jackie and Kenneth claimed that they had a meeting with some officials from the DOJ. One told them that the black and white shoe seemed to be planted underneath Kendrick's body and that they all felt something had happened here. Kenneth says that they told him that they had evidence against Rick Bell, but that unfortunately all that would happen is that he would resign. According to the documentary, this is what happened. I have done extensive research to try to find when Rick Bell resigned, and I can't. But according to the documentary, he did after this. So, I don't know. The first district judge who was set to hear the case of this civil lawsuit recused himself. After this, all remaining 6 in the district did the same, citing their close proximity to those organizations accused or people. The case was then transferred to the Southern District of Ohio. You didn't glitch. I said it. What the hell? What do we make of this? Not Alabama.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know.
Think people's opinions? I don't know.
I thought, though, that if you were, moving a case, for jurisdiction, publicity purposes, that it still had to be within the same state. So I don't make anything of it because I didn't know this was a thing.
I don't know that it is. In 2016, though, even that judge resigned and returned to private practice. Oh. But also in 2016, Benjamin Crump sent a letter to the Johnsons letting them know that he would no longer be able to assist in their case. He says that the state bar did not approve of him continuing on their case beyond the initial surveillance requests. However, research seems to indicate that it wouldn't be the state bar who would approve that. It would be the court. So, I don't know. It was
maybe he decided it was an accident.
I think that's very likely what happened.
I don't know.
It was also strange when CNN shared an interesting email from the Lowndes County coroner, Bill Watson. He had agreed to and done an interview with CNN explaining how he felt the police on the scene had handled things wrong, like calling me 5 hours late. Later, though, he emailed them and they put this email on TV. They said, "Oh, fuck off, Bill Watson." He emailed them saying, quote, "I would appreciate it if you would destroy this interview with me. I do not want this to be shown whatsoever. I feel that our situation should not be aired." End quote. And they said, "Ha ha. We'll air this too." Bill.
Oh no.
A 2018 affidavit from the Lowndes County courts detailed a possible confession. An anonymous witness testified in the affidavit that another student had confessed to their friend to killing AJ. I did it last time too. To killing KJ. So the witness is saying, my friend told me that someone confessed to them. How this is a hearsay, I don't know, but we'll see. This person that confessed, I guess, was said, it's all blocked out. Every single name is blocked out. So you don't even know, like, you're trying to piece together, like, which one is the friend and which one is the murderer and which one is the murderer's friend.
Let's name them now.
Okay.
The murderer's name is Brian.
Oh. Witness is Willie. For witness. And friend is Farah, because I do think she's a girl.
Okay.
And
killer.
Brian.
Yeah.
So Willie says that Farah told him that Brian was raging from recent steroid use.
And let's clarify, this is Brian spelled with a Y.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about Brian Bell. We do not want to be sued.
Brian Doe. Yeah. Brian Doe was raging from recent steroid use when he got into an altercation with KJ and hit him with a 45-pound dumbbell. Farah said the blow might have been to KJ's neck. The affidavit also alleges that someone got in touch with someone who could facilitate the editing of the school's surveillance footage. One of those someone's might rhyme with Nick. Nick Kell. What?
That's crazy.
So someone may have asked someone to edit the school surveillance footage. Supposedly up to an hour and a half of footage may have been edited. And finally, they state that they were told that the organ removal was an attempt to cover up the time of death and that the autopsy findings in the original autopsy were falsified. It's a pretty damning affidavit.
Goes all the way to the top.
Yes, it's a pretty damning affidavit, but it also comes after everything. So, like, right. Oh, blunt force trauma to the neck. Oh, could have been whacked in the neck with a dumbbell.
Yeah.
Oh, his organs are missing. Oh, yep, I heard that too. Like, it just, I don't know that there's a way to, like, verify this.
Yeah.
And you don't even know anyone's name, so we don't know, like, is the witness trustworthy? Like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
But listen, friends, I understand how quickly me and Mary ate up that Terry Hobbs affidavit, so you want to come for me and my hypocrisy, and that's fine. The family is feeling, obviously...
I was actually waiting for you to say, I believe it because it's an assigned affidavit.
I know, I was saying to Billy that, like, when we got that Terry Hobbs affidavit, we were like, oh, but then this makes sense, and then this makes sense. And, like, this affidavit, like, yeah, I guess it makes stuff make sense, but it's not stuff that, like, I was wondering about. It's stuff that's like obvious. So I'm like, okay. So the family is obviously feeling more and more like this is a multi-agency and at this point multi-state cover-up. But the Johnson family also has their opponents. Lee Touchton, who was at the time the president of the Valdosta NAACP chapter, and the lead investigator for the local SCLC, has been vocal in her opinion that KJ's death was an accident. She said, quote, In the death of Kendrick Johnson, the Georgia NAACP completely ignored mountains of evidence and instead chose to listen to two attorneys who have essentially tried this case in the court of public opinion. To date, there is still no credible evidence to support any of the outrageous accusations made. End quote.
Yeah.
Touchton, yeah, oh, I got more from her. She was raging. Touchton believes that Dr. Anderson is not a credible source. She says that she sat on a phone call for over an hour listening to the Johnsons and their attorney make false statements. She said, quote, "I knew these statements were false because of the interviews that our NAACP branch had conducted, our branch's review of the case file, and that I was holding the GBI medical examiner autopsy in front of me. I was astounded to listen to Shaveen King give a fantastical description of medical findings that were untrue, and to also hear him state that the GBI medical examiner's office and the school system were both stonewalling and would not release crucial documents, the ones that were in her hand." Touchton resigned from her position of NAACP president, along with, quote, "most of the Valdosta NAACP officers. None of us were going to publicly accuse anyone of murder when the evidence clearly showed that Kendrick Johnson's death was a tragic accident," end quote. She said that she did investigate the family's claim that KJ's body was intentionally kept in a warm cooler. She found that there was a system that would alert if the cooler reached a certain temperature and logs to look back in time to check the temperatures. And there's no indication that the cooler temperatures rose beyond what was acceptable. Reverend Floyd Rose, president of the Valdosta SCLC, who had been a huge supporter of the Johnson family, had many of the same beliefs as Lee Touchton. He had marched alongside the Johnsons and 1,600 other people to support their efforts. When Jackie and Kenneth were arrested for protesting, Reverend Rose even put up his home as collateral to pay their bail. But in 2015, he stated that he believed KJ's death to be a tragic accident. He says that it isn't easy to go up against a Black family who are challenging white authorities in Georgia. And he acknowledges that the family's and the community's inability to trust or rely on law enforcement is based on a very real and horrifying history, which can make it difficult to differentiate things that could be true from what actually is true in this case. In 2021, the case was reopened, but a year later, it was once again ruled accidental and remains closed today. And I think that that is a good place to get our thoughts. So.
Me first?
Yep.
Okay. I have always kind of thought that he was killed. I will say though, I think like you said earlier, this is like one of those ones that like so much of it lends itself to a murder, so much of it lends itself to an accident. And I think that regardless of which it was, the people who handled it after the fact were careless with him and his body and his investigation. And like, I don't think that that should be overlooked. Like, I think that his parents have the right to be outraged at how his case was handled because it was like overlooked in a lot of ways. I also though I feel like something that I'm like stuck on is the like surveillance being botched and like the redactions in the FBI file, like even like the organs, like you would think if all of those things, if it was an accident, all of those things should align with it being an accident, and you would want to publish those things to prove that it was an accident. And like the fact that those things are like missing, like at the very least, it looks like you're hiding something. And what would you have to hide if this truly happened the way you said it did? But I think that like at minimum, I think, and I like, it hit me like when they said like it's really hard to like go up against his family and say like I don't think that they're like looking at this honestly, because like you you want to like support them and like
Yeah.
believe what they believe and like back them. And I think it's very possible it was an accident. I think it's very possible it wasn't. But like I think that regardless, they do have a reason to be pissed
Yeah.
because there like are very clearly things that were mishandled, like not calling the coroner on time, or
Yep.
his organs being lost, like
Yeah.
not ever naming any kind of people of interest or suspects.
Mhm.
Like it just and I think that like if Brian Bell were found in
Yep.
that, it would
People have
not
said
have
that.
been
Yep.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel similarly that like in this one there are cases where I can say like I think it's probably an accident. I'm
Yeah.
open to evidence, but I think probably blank. In this one, I truly don't know.
Yeah.
I think that as it sits right now, there's certainly not enough evidence to even prove that there was a murder, let alone prove that someone committed the murder. I don't necessarily know that that means the case needs to be closed. I think
Mhm.
many cases are undetermined and remain open-ish. I
Yeah.
think that the reason they keep closing it is that they hope that that will stop the family, that like we will say, okay, we looked again and this is
Right.
still the case. So like please for the public, like let it go.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I think that for me, this is one that I would certainly watch. I would pay attention to anything that comes out of this case. I could certainly be convinced by new evidence.
Yeah.
Either way, I think I struggle with the same thing. That the question is, okay, if it was an accident, then like why did we remove footage of Brian Bell?
Right.
Why did we remove the organs? And like sure the organs and whatever could just be they don't care about this kid and that
Right.
could all be based in racism too. But like why specifically hide Brian Bell's location? If it was at 9:53 a.m., couldn't you just say like, "Yep, looks like he was in the hallway with him," but at the time that he went missing, like Brian's nowhere near. But
Mhm.
like to hide the fact that Brian was even near him 4 hours earlier is like
Right.
weird to me.
Right.
So I think that like I just struggle with like then there must be something we're hiding, and if there's something we're hiding, then like isn't it probably what they think it is?
Right.
And I do think that we also have to question like, are any of the timestamps on the cameras correct? If the FBI can fudge the cameras, like, I don't know. And so I also understand the argument that like the FBI and the freaking US DOJ are like trying to cover up this KJ obviously deserves to live, but this random kid from Georgia's murder to
Yeah.
save one agent, one Georgia agent. Like it does seem like a little unlikely that the cover up would be this large. Um, People have also argued that at no fault of the Johnsons, they're being used by like the movement. And
Mhm.
like that their trauma and their grief is like being co-opted to
Yeah.
like forward this, which is sad to consider, though interesting that most of those people who were originally helping them now don't believe that. So I don't know. This one's rough because it's like if you came to me and you said, like, proven this, I'd be like, oh man, cool. I believe it.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of weirdness.
Yeah. It's
What?
definitely suspicious. Yeah, I think like at the very least they're covering something up, whether it's like just like mishandling.
Yeah.
There's something that they're like not being honest about.
Yeah. So I want to end with this from Kendrick's mom, Jackie. She said, quote, he had big dreams. We knew he was going to make it. He used to come and tell us, Y'all ain't gonna have to worry about working no more because I'm gonna take care of you. End quote. He was like, I'm gonna be a star.
Sweet baby.
Yeah.
One of my kids, if you ask him what he wants to be when he grows up, he says famous. I say famous for what? Don't care.
Hopefully
irrelevant.
Yeah, hopefully something good.
And then he like had to write a sentence about it, and he wrote, "When I grow up, I'm going to be famous because it is my dream."
Sweet. I would say, let us know what you think about this case. Obviously divided. I also will say, like, this is the most like number of like sources that I've ever had, because there is so much misinformation, so much like checking information, so much disputing information. So if you have information that I don't, or you're like, wait, no, I heard the opposite of that, then let us know. And that's all.
Yeah. Next time we do true crime, it'll be pretty cut and dry what happened.
Nice. We won't make you think too hard.
No. Oh, you're gonna think.
Oh no.
Just about.
But you have a 2-week break, so you keep thinking about this one.
Life.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.